the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings, and as always, welcome back. It's been reported that a strike carried out by U.S. forces on a boat in the Caribbean Sea, which the White House says killed 11 drug traffickers, may have violated international human rights and maritime law, according to legal experts. May have? Sounds like murder on the high seas to me. Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome back to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. You know, with each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a couple of today's headlines. Raid at Hyundai factory in Georgia is Trump administration's largest yet. Law enforcement agents raided a Hyundai factory in Bryan County, Georgia yesterday, arresting nearly 500 South Korean immigrant workers in the largest worksite raid since Trump retook the White House. The massive raid follows months of strained negotiations between the U.S. and South Korea over tariffs and investments. And in late August, the presidents of both countries met after Trump suggested that the U.S. might stop doing business with South Korea. I tell you, folks, this is a hell of a way to negotiate. Republicans in Congress earlier today unveiled legislation that would bolster the Trump administration's push to rebrand the Department of Defense as the Department of War, a moniker the U.S. military apparatus held until it was changed in the 1940s from the Department of War to the Department of Defense. Trump floated this idea in recent weeks. He's expected to issue an executive order today, and that is still going to require approval from Congress. And yes, that makes Pete Hegseth the Secretary of War. Oh, Pete, I'm scared. On today's episode, the issue before us is U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that the U.S. may again attack vessels allegedly used for drug trafficking through the Caribbean, claiming that the cartels, quote, have used maritime routes for many years, end quote, to traffic drugs to the U.S. and that intelligence and interception efforts are insufficient to combat them, making it imperative to take more drastic measures. Has the U.S. become Barbary pirates? Let's ask my guest. He's a former high-ranking CIA counterterrorism officer, the first U.S. official to confirm CIA torture of detainees, punished for being a whistleblower. He served nearly 2 years in federal prison. He also exposed the CIA's involvement in a secret rendition to torture in Syria of Canadian citizen Maher Arar. John Kiriakou, I'm proud to say, my friend.
My friend.
John Kiriakou, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you. And thanks for addressing these important issues.
Well, hey, man, thank you for joining us. And let's start with Murder on the high seas. I mean, I don't know any other way. If it was in fact a drug boat, as I understand it, the protocol would be to capture the vessel, board the vessel, inspect the vessel, and then if contraband is found, then you seize the vessel.
Right. It's not so complicated, is it?
I don't think so. And I haven't spoken to anybody about this. That to me is just the logical way you do this instead of murdering 11 people, John.
And that's really what this comes down to. It comes down to the murder of 11 people, none of whom had ever been charged with a crime by the U.S. government or any other government. So let's look at this a couple different ways. You recall, I'm sure, that just after becoming president for the second time, Donald Trump had the State Department designate the cartels as terrorist groups. We all said at the time that the reason he did that, this was really a paperwork exercise, where he did that so that it could free up organizations like NSA, for example, or DIA to spend money on intercepting communications, on using the money for training of Mexican or other nationals, et cetera, et cetera. You talked about connecting the dots in your intro, and I think what we're seeing here is Donald Trump trying really hard to connect some dots that just aren't there. And what I mean is, I think that in Trump's mind, the fact that he declared the cartels without actually naming the cartels as terrorist organizations, he thinks this then gives the US government the right to begin attacking anybody or any vessel whom Donald Trump deems to be a member of a cartel or a member of a terrorist group. In fact, that's not what we've seen here. What we've seen here is, for lack of a better term, piracy on the high seas, followed by a mass murder. There was a funny to me, it's not funny, haha, it's funny, ironic, statement by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago a couple of days ago, a woman whose name I don't recall now. And she said, "Good on you, Donald Trump. Thank you for saving the people of Trinidad and Tobago from having to deal with these drugs." But then the other 15 members of this Caribbean cooperation, CARICOM, thank you. They said, wait a minute, not so fast. We have agreements with the United States, and the agreements state very clearly that the U.S. has to coordinate any such attack with us, and they haven't. Not only did they not coordinate it, they didn't even inform us that they were going to do it. So what are we seeing here? I think we're seeing, and I hate to be so cynical about it, Wilmer, I really do, but I think what we're seeing here is a president who doesn't hate the notion of murdering people, people who have never been charged with a crime, because it makes him look tough and it makes him look decisive. And I think that's what played out on the high seas. I think we're going to see more of it. Now, let me add one other thing. After I left the CIA and before I was arrested and sent to prison, I was the chief investigator on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, working under its chairman, John Kerry. One of the investigations that I initiated, and I wrote and published a committee report on it, was the drug trade in Central and South America and its effects on Western Europe. Okay, most of the drugs coming to the United States, most of the hard drugs coming to the United States come from obviously Mexico, but now mostly Ecuador. Back in 2009, 2010, early 2011, there were drugs not coming from Venezuela, but passing through Venezuela. And the reason is that they were allowed to take off from airports in Venezuela unmolested and then fly to West Africa, where the drugs were offloaded, put on camels of all things, and then walked along Tuareg trade routes going back 1,500 years to the Mediterranean coast, and then put on fast boats and sent to Spain for distribution across Europe. The United States never accused the Venezuelan government of being involved in such a thing. What we said was that these isolated Venezuelan airstrips and airports were the locations from which these drug planes were taking off. Okay, we've never, as a government, we've never accused Venezuela of being involved in the drug trade. Now Donald Trump wants us to believe that not only are the Venezuelans involved in drugs, but they are the kingpins of South American drugs. And we're supposed to take his word for it when he tells us, well, listen, I had to kill these 11 guys. We don't know their names. We don't know who they are, but take my word for it. They were smuggling drugs, and somehow that was a threat to the United States.
I think when you mentioned the prime minister from Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Persad Bissir,
right? I
think is who you were making reference to. The boat that the U.S. attacked was not the usual type of boat, as I understand it, that drug traffickers would use.
Correct.
11 people on the boat is probably more people than drug traffickers would have, because people have weight and they much rather have 180 pounds of whatever drug they're transporting on the boat than Pedro or whoever else they want to put on the boat. I always ask my audience when they hear these types of stories, does it make sense?
No, it doesn't make any sense.
You don't have to be John Kiriakou, who was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and wrote a report on drug trafficking into Western Europe, to ask yourself, does the story make sense?
No.
And oh, by the by, they haven't provided any evidence.
See, this is one of the things that I hate the most, is this take my word for it attitude, where if you could see the classified information that I see, then you would know, blah, 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 blah. It's all nonsense. They always say that when they don't want you to look into things. You said something important I want to reiterate. 11 people on a drug boat tells me it's not a drug boat. For a couple of reasons.
It's an evening dinner cruise.
It's exactly right. But 11 people on a drug boat is 10 people that can rat you out. Right? We don't want all those people to have access to the information. They're going to rat each other out to save their skins. The point you made about weight is a very important one.
Let's just assume, for the sake of simple math, the 10 people too many, each of them weighed 180 pounds, times 10 is 1,800 pounds.
Yeah, that's almost a ton
of cocaine,
of drugs that you could put on it, that's wasted by these people just sort of sitting around waiting for the boat to dock wherever it's going to dock.
It makes no sense.
No.
So go ahead.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Number one, there are too many people with access to the information. They're all going to rat each other out if they get caught. Number two, that's a ton of cocaine that they could have put on the boat instead of a ton of people just sitting there doing nothing. And third, listen, whether this administration likes it or not, we are a nation of laws. We are a nation governed by a constitution. And whether you like these people or not, whether you like what they're doing or not, whether you are accusing them of something that you wouldn't do is unimportant. What is important is that they have a constitutional right to face their accusers in a court of law, to be judged by a jury of their peers, not to just take a rocket from a drone up their rear ends and blow them to smithereens. So listen, whether we think we're the good guys or we think we're the bad guys, we committed a crime in this attack. This was an international crime for which no one will ever be punished.
The use of language, the power to define is the power to control. And you were talking about Donald Trump using the term terrorist organization.
Yes.
I think along with the explanation that you gave, there is another explanation. Not only does labeling whatever entity he's referring to as a terror organization then give him the ability to get on the phone and call various American intelligence or other types of operations and get them into gear, but it also then, in terms of domestic news consumption, allows him, in his mind, to get away with murder.
Yeah.
Because when he says, oh, this was a terrorist organization, Sam Jones, the farmer in Iowa, he's going to say, oh, go get those terrorists. Mm-hmm. When he says, I have to send troops into D.C. For national security. Well, as soon as he says national security, well, in his mind, he can do anything he wants.
Anything.
So go ahead.
Anything. You've just reminded me of something too. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a minute and give a little bit of background.
Take 2 minutes.
Thank you. I might actually use the whole 2 minutes. In 2008, I was working as a terrorism consultant for ABC News. And the very first story that I covered was the arrest of a Pakistani American woman by the name of Dr. Afia Siddiqui.
I remember that.
Remember Afia? She was, at the time, we were told that she was the most dangerous terrorist captured since Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, right? Mm-hmm. And that she had tried to shoot 2 FBI agents who were trying to debrief her. And instead, they shot her and she was almost killed. And she finally was brought back to the United States, put on trial, convicted, and she got 86 years in prison. That was in 2008. Now, here we are in 2025, and the truth is coming out that she never fired at any FBI agents. She never had a gun. It was one of the FBI agents had set his gun down. He grabbed it and picked it up, and a soldier shot her twice in the stomach. Well, at trial, one of the things that the prosecution produced, the Justice Department produced, was a picture of the room that she was being interrogated in, and it had 2 bullet holes in the walls. And they said, you see, she fired at the FBI agent. It's attempted murder. The bullets missed and they're in the wall. Well, her attorneys have just found a picture from that same room that was taken a couple of days before, and there are bullet holes already in the wall. They didn't come from her. And now people are beginning to come forward and say, well, okay, maybe she didn't shoot at the FBI agents, but she wanted to. And then in the meantime, she's been saying something, and she's been called crazy because of it. She's been saying, when I was arrested, the CIA stole my 3 children. Now, 2 of them were found and returned to Afia Siddiqui's sister. The third, who would now be 18 years old, has never been found. Now, we were told in 2008, Wilmer, that none of this was true. None of it. She's lying. She's Al-Qaeda. She made the whole thing up. And now they're saying, okay, it's true. We returned 2 of the 3 kids to the sister. We're sorry. We shouldn't have taken them. Oh, the 3rd kid, you know what? When we were trying to take that kid to an orphanage, we dropped him on his head and he died. But remember, all of this was said to be lies in 2008, and now it's acknowledged to be truth. It draws a parallel, at least in my mind, with what happened on this ship. Take our word for it. Major drug smugglers. These drugs were going to end up killing Americans. There isn't enough Narcan to treat the people who are going to be affected by these drugs. We had to kill these people. I'm sorry, but I just don't believe a word of it. I don't believe a word of it because I know how the CIA, the State Department, DIA, DEA, ATF, I know how they are. They're all liars. And I know because I worked with them and I lived with them. They're all liars. And we can't believe a word that they say. Not until they lay out the evidence, and there's no indication that they're willing to do that.
I thought you were going to tell me that Ms. Siddiqui's 3rd child was on the drug boat that was sunk in Venezuela. I thought that's where you were going.
You know what? That probably would have given her closure. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off your game there.
No. I'm too silly for my own good. If there had been evidence, I believe Donald Trump would be wallpapering the Washington Monument and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial with the evidence. I think Marco Rubio would be running around like Barney Fife. And they get my bullet. See. I think if they had evidence, we would be seeing it ad nauseum.
Amen. It would be on the front page of every newspaper in America. And then Trump would be crowing about how he's saving the country from drugs. But there is no evidence. We're just supposed to take their word for it.
Marco Rubio says the president has declared these organizations, Tren de Aragua, Cartel of the Suns, and all the others, as narco-terrorist groups operating in international waters, bringing drugs to the streets of America, and the president used the American force and power to prevent and protect America, and we blew up a boat. This could happen again. It could be happening right now, tomorrow, or in a few weeks. He said this Wednesday in Mexico. Is this a predicate or a false flag that is really, I mean, where are the weapons of mass destruction in Iran? Is this, whatever happened to those babies in the incubators?
Yeah.
Is this the sinking of the Maine?
Yeah. Wow. Yes. To answer the question directly.
There's a bigger agenda here. I mean, he put 50
and
million on the head. He put 50 million on the head of Maduro, and said that Maduro is, and a number of leaders have come out and said, a number of leaders in South America come out and said, this guy's crazy.
Yeah,
we're not doing this.
No.
So
no, you're 100% right. And see, this is something that governments do, especially the U.S. government. You use the term false flag. That's really what these things are. You know, going back to the babies in the incubators, that was an important event in my early career. I had been in the CIA for less than a year. We're getting ready to go to war with Iraq, and And there's this young girl, this young Kuwaiti girl speaking impeccable English, testifying before the House of Representatives on the Iraqi soldiers pulling prenatal, what's the term I'm looking for? Babies that need to be in incubators, pulling them out of the incubators. Yeah, throwing them on the floor and then stealing the incubators. There were at least
but don't forget stabbing them with bayonets. Now
I forgot. I did forget about the bayonets.
John. You can't leave out the bayonets.
So there are a dozen CIA officers were standing around the TV. We're watching this testimony. I was a minute late, so I finished whatever it was I was doing. I got up. I walked to the TV. All my colleagues are standing there, and they're like shaking their heads like, my God, this is a crime against humanity, what this poor girl is describing. And I said, hey, I know her. And my boss said, what do you mean you know her? I said, that's Saud Nasser's daughter, the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. I said, I met her at a dinner party. And my boss said, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And then we all looked at each other like, oh my God, yes, it does make sense. This is a false flag. We stepped right in the middle of it. And the American people are going to be convinced to go to war because this girl is saying that the Iraqi soldiers went into the hospital and stabbed premature babies and threw them on the floor and stole the incubators. That's the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter. She's making the whole thing up. And of course she was. And we saw it, in the Gulf of Tonkin. We saw it, oh my God, repeatedly throughout the course of contemporary American history. My guess is, and I think you agree, we're seeing it again right now. If these guys had drugs and they were terrorists, and there are, rewards out there for capturing terrorists, we would have grabbed them. We would have stacked up all the drugs and made a propaganda picture for it. We would have laid out all the evidence. We would have seized the boat and sold it at auction, and we would have lived happily ever after. But this notion that we just, fly a drone out there and just send a rocket that blows these people to smithereens, I'm not buying it. Mm-mm.
Take the incubator story and fast forward to, Russia went into Ukraine in February 22.
Right.
So this was March or April. Russia sent a missile into a maternity hospital in Ukraine and killed all these babies. And I said, wait a minute. Another baby story.
Mm-hmm.
There were all these babies in these incubators. And wait a minute. Baby story. I've heard baby story before.
Mm-hmm.
And what did we find out? That it wasn't a maternity hospital. Well, I think once upon a time it had been, but it was formerly a maternity hospital that had been turned into a communications center for the Ukraine intelligence organization.
There you go. Which actually then makes sense.
That a missile somehow found its way.
Oh, listen, during the actual Gulf War, the hot war, I'm sure that you remember, we bombed using cruise missiles. We bombed a bunker in which the wives and children of Iraqi cabinet members were taking refuge. Okay, we killed everybody. We killed like 120 something people. And I remember this debate taking place at the CIA. Like, well, what did they think was going to happen? They shouldn't have been married to those evil people in the first place. And then somebody says, well, we can't use that as an excuse. They shouldn't have been married to the Iraqis in the first place. Well, maybe they had communications equipment down there. It's like, well, maybe they didn't have communications equipment down there. It's a bunker. It's a bomb shelter This is women and children took refuge in a bomb shelter, and we're trying to come up with an idea that's convincing enough to ourselves that we can go public with, saying that, well, we bombed it on purpose. We had to bomb it on purpose for these 3 really good reasons. There was no good reason to bomb a fallout shelter. You know, what we should have done was apologize and say, we really screwed this up. We killed all these women and children. This was, fog of war or whatever, but this was a terrible mistake and we apologize. We don't apologize ever as a policy. And so we're not going to see any smoking gun in this Venezuela situation. We're not going to see any evidence. We're not going to see next week Marco Rubio doing a press conference saying, look, I wanted to lay out the evidence that we used. We had these meetings with the Justice Department. Are we allowed to do this? None of that ever took place. They were just looking for somebody to kill. This was the first boat that met the criteria, and they fired.
So again, false flag to provide the rationale for a larger mission. Your thoughts on, and again, the United States has put a bounty or has increased the bounty that Joe Biden put on the head of Nicolas Maduro. So the first point to that is, this is not simply Trump administration policy.
No,
this is American foreign policy. So to that point, and now Maduro is saying, I'm calling out my citizens' militia.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people in the United States don't know is that when Maduro says that, he isn't joking.
That's right.
The one thing the United States can't do is send soldiers into Venezuela, because now you're talking urban guerrilla warfare. You might as well go back to Vietnam and look at that video, because that's what you're about to step into.
Yeah, or Baghdad, for that matter.
Go ahead.
This is something that the U.S. is really very, very bad at, and that is what happens after the invasion. We're very good at invading people.
Sure.
That's easy. We're really bad at actually fighting the war and getting out. And we get bogged down and everybody gets killed or maimed or wounded in some way. And then they come back and we thank them for their service and they're allowed to board the airplane before we do. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Venezuela would be particularly tough for the United States because, like many countries, there are people who love the government and people who hate the government. And for the most part, the people who hate the government have left. And so what you have now is a majority of people in Venezuela on the ground who are supporters of President Maduro. If the United States were to invade Venezuela, the American army would be almost immediately bogged down in a guerrilla war, fighting door to door in a fight that they couldn't win. We've never been able to win in an urban area going door to door. Never. And at the same time, the Venezuelans have not just been sitting twiddling their thumbs for the last 10 or 20 years. They've been cultivating relations with China.
Mm-hmm.
And where most Venezuelan oil used to come to the United States because our refineries are equipped to handle Venezuela's oil. Venezuela's oil is very, very dirty. It's the dirtiest oil in the world. It has the highest sulfur content in the world. So you need specialty refineries to take the sulfur out. And where are those special refineries? They're in South Texas. Well, the Chinese went into the Caribbean and they built a refinery in the Caribbean. So that oil doesn't need to come to the United States anymore. Now the Chinese are involved and they have a real economic interest in maintaining good and safe relations with Venezuela. They're not going to let the Americans screw that up for them.
The United States tried to impose Juan Guaido on the people of Venezuela, took over the Venezuelan embassy. I know you were down there in Washington during that protest. Then after Juan Guaido failed, Marina Machado,
right?
They tried to put her in the position. One of the things, again, that I think gets lost in the translation here in the West, as the United States tries to vilify Maduro, is Venezuelans don't see Maduro for the sake of Maduro. This is not government by personality.
Right.
It's the fact that Maduro represents the leadership of the Chavista revolution. So it's his adherence to the revolutionary ideology that they align themselves with, not the fact he's a nice looking guy with a nice head of hair and wears nice suits and can probably cha-cha or merengue. I don't know. So as the United States tries to vilify him, that's a waste of time, because in their minds, it's not about him. It's about what he's doing.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Wilmer. Yeah, you made me smile thinking back on that last night in the Venezuelan embassy. I was one of, there were a couple of dozen of us there, but the Venezuelans had asked us to go into the embassy the night that the United States broke relations with Venezuela. I still have the Venezuelan government's stuff in my house, sitting around here in my house. They asked us just to hold on to it until they can re-enter the embassy, and then we're just going to give them all their stuff back. But that night that I was there was a huge crowd outside, people chanting, pro-Venezuelan chants and people chanting anti-Venezuelan chants. And so it came time to leave. I walked out of the embassy, and I happened to walk past two uniformed Secret Service, I don't want to call them agents, but Secret Service uniformed service. Yeah. And one of them said to the other, "So tell me again who's who." And the other one said, "The ones that are out here are with us. The ones that are in there are with Putin." And I turned and looked like, what? And then I thought, no, you know what? It's not even worth wasting my breath. But this is the propaganda that the American government feeds to its own people and its own employees, frankly.
Right.
To make it easier to hate people with whom we disagree on politics. So now we've gotten ourselves to the point where we can just drone a boat and kill everybody. And then it comes down to, well, they weren't with us, so they were with Putin. So Maduro's with Putin, so that's okay. That's all right. I don't object to this.
There's a piece in Newsweek that is entitled, "Could the U.S., France, and the UK be the straw that breaks Maduro's back? Trump's recent decision to deploy 8 warships, including a submarine near Venezuela, is the right one. Some might argue that the U.S. is risking plunging itself into an ethically questionable war, but that is unlikely. Rather, this is a targeted effort to support a legitimately elected Venezuelan leadership against a fictitious president running a shadow narco-terrorist organization." This is Newsweek.
That doesn't even make any sense.
This is Newsweek.
It's like this Henry Scoop Jackson Foundation, which for reasons that have never been clear to me is based in London rather than in Seattle or Washington, D.C. But they came out with a report day before yesterday saying that the government of Iran is on the brink of collapsing and that it could happen in the next 2 weeks. Well, I have friends in Iran now, good friends. I have friends who constantly go back and forth between Iran and the United States. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the Iranian economy or government right now. They have great relations with Russia, China, and India. They lack for nothing. Like, who is this report supposed to convince? Us? Again, if you have evidence, lay out your evidence and let us come to our own conclusions. Just like with Iran, Venezuela, lay out the evidence.
First, well, here's the evidence. First, the Chavist regime of Maduro is not operating like a real state or even a classic dictatorship. The international community has begun to recognize it is a criminal structure posing a security risk for the hemisphere. For 25 years, Chavism has co-opted Venezuela's infrastructure for its own enrichment, persecuting journalists and opposition, wrecking the economy, and leaving its citizens in poverty. John, no mention of sanctions.
Yeah. And this is the sick thing. We never mentioned sanctions vis-a-vis the Venezuelan economy. We never mentioned sanctions vis-a-vis the Cuban economy. Mm-hmm. You've been to Cuba many times. I went to Cuba for the first time 2.5 years ago. And I was shocked first at how resilient the Cuban people are, but I was shocked at just how much damage the embargo does. And it's not just sanctions on Cuba, it's an embargo. Right. For example, I foolishly said, my God, we got to eat squash with every single meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, squash, squash, squash. I'm sick of squash. And the guy next to me is like, that's what the embargo did. They can only eat what they grow, and this happens to be squash season. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of myself. I can't believe I didn't even think of that. But then one of our members of our group got sick. We were all sitting out behind our hotel one night, and a mosquito bit her, and she got dengue fever. Mm. So she was taken to the hospital and had like 24/7 hands-on care where they assign a nurse to you, and the nurse like sits in your room for anything that you need. You need a drink of water, you need a Tylenol, whatever. They're there to serve you. The doctors, of course, in Cuba are used to dealing with dengue fever. And so they were able to give her an antiviral that made her feel better. And she was released from the hospital a couple of days later. So she spent 3 days and 2 nights in the hospital. The bill was $75.
Wow.
But you can't pay it because you're not allowed to give dollars to the Cuban government. And this was a government hospital. So we had to go through this whole rigmarole where some of us, I'm proud to say, I'm a Greek citizen as well as an American citizen, and I brought euros with me. And Greece does not have an embargo on Cuba. So I was able to give them euros that they could then give to the Cubans. And the doctor said something to me afterwards. He said, now you see how things are with this embargo? If she had been Cuban, she may have died, or she may have become profoundly sick because we just don't have access to all the medications that we need to treat all of the people in Cuba who need access to these medications simply because of the embargo. And I said something, I said, I'm embarrassed to even say that I complained about squash the other day. And the doctor said, oh, I know what you're going to say. You're tired of eating squash. And I said, yeah, I'm tired of eating squash. But I had no idea that with the embargo, you're not even allowed to import food. And he said, this is a crime against humanity. And the world really doesn't know that it's taking place. And, even at the CIA, there were a lot of people that I work with at the CIA that hated this embargo. And I remember one of them saying, if we want Castro was still in power at the time, but he said, if we really want the Castro brothers to be overthrown, the way we do that is to open the first McDonald's.
Absolutely. Oh, John.
That's it.
Yeah. I was in Iran, and I'm sorry, audience, for those of you that have heard this story before. And I'm sitting in the hotel, and I'm looking at all these women that have all this surgical tape on their faces.
I know what you're going to say. Yes. Yes, you're exactly right.
So I asked my interpreter, Ali, because, first of all, the first day I was trying to count them, but there were so many women that I couldn't count them. So a couple of days later, I asked Ali, I said, man, what's up with this? And he says, well, Tehran is the cosmetic surgery capital of the Middle East.
Yes, it is.
And he said, these Iranian women are looking at Western glamour magazines and they want to look like Western women. So they're getting their noses done. And so fast forward, I'm on Press TV. I'm at their main studio in Tehran. And
the one we bombed, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And doing this interview, and the guy interviewing me asks me, what are your thoughts of the country since you've been here? And I said, well, hey, man, everything's great. The food is phenomenal. The people are beautiful, blah, blah, blah. I said, but here's one thing I think you need to pay attention to. I said, you don't really need to be afraid of General Schwarzkopf. You need to be concerned about Colonel Sanders.
There it is right there.
I said, because when the 2-piece and a biscuit hits your shores, that sodium, that artificial flavor, you are going to start seeing obesity, heart disease. You are going to start walking around here looking like Americans. And that's not a good look.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I said, man, that 2-piece and a biscuit's going to do you all in.
My partner is an Iranian American. She has dual citizenship. And she has told me exactly the same thing, that every time she goes, and she usually goes twice a year, every single time she goes, she speaks with foreigners. She lives in the center of Tehran. Or she doesn't, I mean, when she's there, she lives in the center of Tehran. She has an apartment. And she told me the last trip that she spoke with people from Oman, people from Kazakhstan, people from Eastern Europe. Why are you there? Oh, I'm here for a nose job. I'm here for new veneers on my teeth. I'm here for a facelift. Here in the West, we think, oh, Turkey is the place to go now for cheap cosmetic surgery. Oh, no, it's not. Besides the fact that Turks are going to ruin your teeth. It's Iran. It's Iran, and it's a fraction of the price.
Cataract surgery was invented in Iran.
In Iran. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Brilliant, beautiful, wonderful people. The food is just
incredible.
The squash is I didn't know squash tasted like, I didn't know a tomato.
Yeah, they're like apples.
Monsanto hasn't gotten there to kill their soil. Mm-hmm. I didn't know a tomato was that red. Yeah. And like you said, like an apple.
When I was living in Bahrain, I lived in Bahrain from 1994 to 1996. And even before that, I was living in Kuwait in 1991, just at the end of the war. We would get these vegetables, just guys on the side of the street, on the side of the highway, would lay out fruits and vegetables and you could buy stuff. So there were these melons. They were shaped like a football and they were pale yellow. And I was like, oh, I've never seen a melon look like that before. I'll buy it. How much is it? It's a dinar, $2.65. Okay, I'll buy one. So I bought it. The inside was white and it was like eating pure sugar. Juicy, sweet, magnificent. So I see the guy the next day and I said, I want to buy another one of those melons. What are these melons anyway? Oh, he says, that's called the Iranian melon. I said, well, come on. I mean, that's not really the name. He said, I don't know the name. We just call them Iranian melons. And I said, so are they from Iran? And he said, yeah, Dows cross the Gulf every day And then early in the morning, the dhows land at the port. The Iranians on the dhows are not allowed off.
Mhm.
But he said, we just go to the dhow. We agree on a price. We buy their fruits and vegetables, and we sell them just on the side of the street. It was the most magnificent fruit I've ever eaten in my life. And I've not been able to find it anywhere else outside of the Persian Gulf.
Mhm.
But it was the same thing in Kuwait. I went into Kuwait City with the Marines on Liberation Day, February of 1991. The whole country's on fire. There's no food. We're eating MREs. And I would go down to, those 3 towers. It's kind of the symbol of Kuwait. It's called Kuwait Towers. The dhows would dock there, and we would buy pomegranates and tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce and these melons and apples. And you name it, the Iranians were growing it. And it was absolutely magnificent. I can't wait to go to Iran. I've been invited a number of times and I haven't been able to go, but one of these days.
I've been twice, would love to go back. Well, that's another story. Robert Brown asks, what other tactics will the United States use to depose the government of Venezuela?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, if other countries in the region, and outside the region serve as an example, I think we are going to encourage violence and make it look like it's internecine violence. It's one Venezuelan faction against another Venezuelan faction. So we say, oh, no, this has nothing to do with us. This is just Venezuelans hate Maduro and they're trying to win their freedom, their liberty, and all this other nonsense that we say about everybody else. That's my guess. My guess is we're going to see violence, but it's not going to point directly at us. And then at some point, we're going to say, oh, the brave Venezuelan freedom fighting people are asking for our help to liberate them from this narco terrorist state that Maduro is running. We better go in there and help the Venezuelan people. That's what I fear. And I think that's what John Bolton tried to do in Trump 1. When we were at Sputnik, Wilmer, I always referred to Juan Guaido as George Washington University grad student Juan Guaido, because that's all he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, somebody with, I think it was MSNBC, I may be wrong, asked Bolton when he was still National Security Advisor, why do you continue to refer to Juan Guaido as President Guaido when the Venezuelan Constitution says that if he doesn't assume office within 30 days of his election, he's no longer the president? And Bolton was just like,
and he was never elected.
No, because nobody bothered to read the Venezuelan Constitution.
Right. Nobody bothered to read the Constitution. Robert Brown writes, raising the level of awareness is critical to counter and defeat Western hegemony. This platform provides the political education necessary to help us in our struggle. Robert, thank you. That means more than you know. Chance Wilson, thank you for that $20 super sticker. You talked about violence, and that one of the tactics that the United States would turn to is internecine violence. And that made me think about sanctions. And what people don't really appreciate or understand is sanctions usually accomplish the very opposite of what it is.
Absolutely true.
Are designed to accomplish.
Absolutely true, Wilmer. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Go ahead, John.
Sanctions weaken the United States. Okay, time was where we put sanctions on, whatever, Nicaragua.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now we have sanctions on half the countries in the world, including the most powerful countries in the world. We have sanctions on the Russians, we have sanctions on the Chinese, and sanctions here and sanctions there, to the point where nobody cares about our sanctions anymore. I was in China a year ago, and I was surprised at how difficult it was for me to find a place that would take my Visa card. Everybody took this thing called the octopus card. So I asked one of the shopkeepers, I said, what is this octopus card? Why don't you just take the Visa card? And he said, because the Visa card has to go through New York. The octopus card goes through Shanghai. And so we don't care if you put sanctions on us. It doesn't affect us because we all use octopus card. And I said, you know what? That makes perfect sense. So what has happened is we have so overused sanctions to punish countries that we don't like that they've finally worked out a way to just evade our sanctions, avoid our sanctions. They don't need us. And as a result, it has weakened the United States. And so my view is sanctions should be reserved for the worst players in the world and should be imposed in concert with everybody else in the world. For example, sanctions helped to bring down the government of South Africa. That's what sanctions are for, right? Sanctions aren't just, I don't like your politics, so from now on, here's some sanctions. That doesn't benefit anybody. It just hurts us in the end.
Well, and here's another thing. We believe in the West. We impose sanctions on the Cuban government. We impose sanctions on the Venezuelan government. The people are going to get hungry and frustrated, and they're going to turn on the leadership. No. What
never works. Never happens that way.
No,
never.
Because the sanctions strengthen the sense of nationalism. It enables the leader to create the narrative of it's not me, it's Donald Trump.
That's right.
It's us against him. And then the people go, yeah, because it's the United States imposing sanctions on us. Because one of the points you made earlier, most of the Venezuelans that don't like the government have already left the country.
Yeah, they're here.
And they're about to get sent back.
Yes.
Because Donald Trump has taken away their temporary protective status.
That's right.
So they don't work.
No.
I've asked folks, others who study this much more intently than I do, can you name me 3 circumstances in the last 60 years where sanctions have resulted in the desired intent? They don't work.
No. And did you see the news from a few weeks ago? I'm sure that you did, that the Trump administration imposed sanctions on the Brazilian judge that's overseeing the trial of former President Bolsonaro.
Yes.
Well, how would they like it if President Lula imposed sanctions on Donald Trump? Because I would bet my next paycheck, Wilmer, that Donald Trump has significant economic interest in Brazil, and that would hurt.
That would not surprise me in the least. And the judge made the point, and to your point, it would not surprise me if Donald Trump has financial interests there, as he does in the settler colonial state known as Israel.
That's right.
Kevin Baptist, thank you for that $10 super sticker. John, on a podcast, you said one of the dopest lines a brother has ever heard. You said, the oppressor will not participate in your liberation. Keep grinding, man.
Thank you, Kevin. You know, there was somebody back to, let me go back. I hope I didn't freak out Ramplens01. I didn't mean to scare you about your teeth. He's going to go to Turkey soon to get his teeth fixed. Before you do, Google some of the what some of the Brits have written about going to Turkey to have their teeth done. You might want to go to Iran instead.
And they know about bad teeth.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Dr. Leon, as I said before, it's not the government's fault. It's the people that allow it to do whatever they want, even against themselves. Where are the Americans protesting on the streets? You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's this document. You may have read it. There's this document. It starts with this really catchy line, "We the people." What is it called?
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
You may have.
Yeah. I do recall hearing. Yeah.
Oh,
we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union.
There you go. There you go. You know what? I think that was a Beatles song.
Right.
Shelly H., thank you very much for that $10 super sticker. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. John Kiriakou, man, thank you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to see you again. I feel, we used to sit next to each other. For people who don't know, we used to sit next to each other at Sputnik. And I so miss those days and, having a chat before we would go on the air. And it was a real pleasure to work with you, Wilmer.
Well,
I miss it.
John. And the pleasure was and continues to be mine.
Thank you.
So, folks, one of the reasons why you haven't seen John more is because he's always traveling.
Yeah.
Looking forward to having you back, man. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the weekend, man.
You too. All the best.
So, folks, look, let me say this. Hang on. Before I do that, let me do this. I got to be sure. I did that one. Please let's forget. Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episodes next week. Can't tell you who the guest is, but trust me, as the Moon Man would say, it's going to be a big one. Also, please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show. You got to be from DC to understand the Moon Man reference. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow us on social media, folks. I can't stress enough. We are truly in need of your support, and we need you to subscribe. We need you to share the show with others, because I don't think 99% of the facts that you heard today you would ever hear on the mainstream outlets. Why? Because this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Have a wonderful, wonderful, blessed weekend. See y'all on Monday. Until then, peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.